Went out and I rented a rototiller, which I thought was a thing about like so. It turned out to be 7 feet long. Big motor.
For years, America believed Michael Landon was the perfect image of a gentle father, a man of faith and family. But behind that smile was a completely different life nights when he vanished from home. Strange packages delivered to the Malibu mansion, hidden photographs, and smoke-filled parties with faces no one could name. After nearly 40 years of silence, his son Michael Landon Jr. finally told it all. In the interview that made Hollywood hold its breath, he said just one sentence that froze the entire studio. "They praised my father for his kindness, but it was deceit that kept him alive his whole life." That line opened the door to the dark side of a legend, a place where the light of television could never reach. And now let's turn back time to the years 1978, 1983, where the real story began, and America's perfect father first showed his true face. One, my father never loved my mother because he never loved any woman at all. Michael Landon Jr.'s voice dropped as he said those words in a special interview with Vanity Fair in Los Angeles. The room went quiet. The yellow light fell on the face of a man in his 60s, his eyes red, yet burning with something painful and freeing, as if he had finally spoken the truth Hollywood had buried for decades. "He wasn't a cheating husband," Michael said slowly. "He was a man who had to betray himself just to survive." He remembered Beverly Hills in the late 1970s. The Landon house, the happiest home in America, they called it, was always bright, but never warm. In the living room, family photos lined the walls, each frame slightly crooked, as if someone refused to fix them. That house was always cold, Michael recalled. Even when Mom made his favorite meals, steak, mashed potatoes, he never sat down with us. He remembered his birthday in 1980. The cake sat untouched, candles burned out, and his father still hadn't come home. I waited. Mom tried to smile, saying he was busy working, but I saw tears falling into her wine glass. Near midnight, the door opened. Landon walked in smelling of a strange cologne. He patted his son's shoulder. "Happy birthday, champ," then went straight upstairs. No gift, no hug. I thought he was just tired. Later, I realized he was somewhere else, body and soul. While the public worshipped him as America's dad on the cover of People magazine, another rumor spread quietly behind the scenes at NBC. Michael Landon had a special relationship with photographer Eli Rosen, the young man always by his side on the Little House on the Prairie set. Eli wasn't just his photographer, a former lighting technician recalled. He was his shadow. They ate together, left the set together, always whispering. Then came the scandal. In July 1979, while filming in Utah, both men were seen leaving their hotel early in the morning, wearing matching bathrows. A hotel cleaner later said they looked like two people who had just woken up after a long night. NBC immediately held a closed meeting. Days later, Landon suddenly appeared with a new face beside him, an 18-year-old makeup artist named Cindy Clarico. The next day, Variety printed their photo hand-in-hand outside La Scala restaurant, Michael Landon's New Love Lights Up Hollywood. Everyone understood this was a cover-up, but the public believed it was easier to believe. "My father knew how to perform, even off camera," Michael Jr. said. "He kissed her for the cameras like a man proving something, not a man in love." When Cindy became pregnant in late 1982, Michael Jr., then 19, began to hope. "I thought maybe he'd changed. He came home earlier, sometimes even smiled." His mother, Lynn No, had already moved out, choosing silence to protect her children. The media called Cindy Michael's reborn love, and NBC hailed it as the redemption of America's favorite dad. But soon Michael Jr. saw through it. One night in early 1983, he returned home early and overheard his father whispering into the phone, "Don't call again. We can't keep doing this." He didn't hear the name, but deep down, he knew it wasn't Cindy. Weeks later, Landon announced his engagement to Cindy Clarico. The wedding took place hurriedly on Valentine's Day 1983 on a white Malibu beach. Only select journalists were invited. All NBC insiders, the Los Angeles Times headline read, "Michael Landon, love returns after the storm." America exhaled in relief. But in Michael Jr. is a diary written in shaky teenage handwriting. There was only one line he didn't marry for love. He married out of fear. Fear the truth would be seen. That truth, Michael later said, wasn't about infidelity. It was something Hollywood at the time could never accept, a man of fame and power whose heart didn't fit the image he played. I don't blame him for who he was, Michael said, voice trembling. I blame him for lying to all of us just to protect that image. After the wedding, everything worsened. He became distant, angry, and drank more. When Cindy appeared on set, Landon's smile lit up the room. At home, he was silent for hours. No family dinners, no Christmas, no birthdays. One year I sent him a handmade Christmas card, Michael said. He left it unopened on the table and drove off. I watched from the window, saw his face in the car lights. I knew we had nothing left to say. For NBC, the marriage was perfect PR. They launched a press campaign for Highway to Heaven, painting Landon as a symbol of faith and family. But inside the studios, whispers grew. A crew member told Los Angeles Herald-Examiner in 1985 he'd sit in the makeup room for hours staring at himself. When Cindy called, he smiled, but his eyes were empty. As Michael Jr. grew older, he began to understand. My father lived in a time when someone like him couldn't be himself. He said he chose to hide to lie, and in the end, he lost everything, including us. Years later, when his mother Lynn died, Michael found a letter in her drawer. In her delicate handwriting, "You married that girl to protect your image, not your heart." He read it over and over, then smiled sadly. She knew everything but never said a word. She kept his image alive for us. Now at 60, Michael no longer feels anger, only pity. Sometimes he rewatches Little House on the Prairie and sees his father's smile. Beautiful but strangely sad. I once thought he was the strongest man alive, he said, but maybe he was just the loneliest. He looked straight into the camera, voice, calm but firm. I'm not telling this to destroy him. I'm telling it so people understand that behind Hollywood's perfection, there's often a human being quietly falling apart. Then he smiled faintly and whispered, he ran from himself all his life, but in the end, the truth still found him. And that was only the beginning. Because what came next was even darker. The secret that kept Michael Jr. silent for over 40 years. The truth that forever shattered the myth of America's ideal father. 2. That wasn't my father anymore. It was someone else. Someone living in the shadows, breathing through bottles and smoke, forgetting who he was. Michael said this in a hoarse voice, eyes gazing out the window. I used to think he was just lonely after the divorce. But no, he had stepped into a world I never dared imagine. After leaving Lynn? No. Michael Landon moved from his laughter-filled Beverly Hills home to a new mansion in Malibu. Luxurious, empty, facing the Pacific Ocean. Jazz music always played softly at night, drowning out the waves. Those nights smelled of Scotch cigarettes and something sweet and chemical, Michael recalled. He barely came home, and when he did, he passed by me like I was invisible. He smoked 4 packs a day and drank as if it were water. Every night, his office filled with haze. Sometimes black bags arrived at the door. The delivery men never spoke, just nodded and left. Michael said, once I opened one out of curiosity, and what I saw wasn't a movie script, as he claimed. That night, Michael walked downstairs. The lamplight glowed over his father's face. On the table, an ashtray glass tray, gray powder. Landon brushed it together with his fingers, inhaled deeply. His eyes widened with a strange spark. I froze. He looked at me, not angry, not ashamed, just cold, and said, adult stuff, never touch it. Then he turned away like I wasn't there. That's when I knew I'd lost him. After that, metal cases were delivered more often. No one opened them. The delivery men left notes marked only our late-night phone calls echoed through the house. Just deliver it to Studio City. No one must know Michael overheard. The Malibu mansion became a refuge for strangers. Men in dark suits, sunglasses, even indoors. Women who looked like nightclub ghosts. Jazz clinking glasses, smoke thick as fog. None of them ever really smiled. Michael said it was like they came to hide, not to celebrate. Someone whispered they were Hollywood's underground circle, using small film projects for money laundering projects. Landon's name conveniently fronted. Sometimes Michael sneaked downstairs and watched from the dark hallway. His father stood in the neon-lit haze, laughing, drinking arms around men and women alike. Once I saw him kiss someone through the smoke. I couldn't see the face, but the hands weren't a woman's. The teenage boy turned away, heartbreaking under the weight of what he'd seen. In the rare, sober mornings, Landon seemed lost. When Michael visited, his father smiled faintly, the mix of alcohol and cigarettes filling the air. "Do you hear the waves, son?" he asked softly. "I hear them even when I close my eyes." Michael said in those moments he looked like a man imprisoned by his own life. One night in 1986, Michael came unannounced. The office door was ajar. His father slumped in a chair surrounded by crumpled foil and glass tubes. White residue glimmered on the desk. I shook him, but he whispered, "I'm fine. Just need a little energy." I wanted to scream, but couldn't. From then on, Landon spiraled. He couldn't sleep, talked to himself, accused the walls of spying. Once Michael saw him burning old photos, Bonanza little house, murmuring, "So they'll have nothing to use against me." Rumors spread. The National Enquirer quoted neighbors, "Unmarked cars come at midnight, strange people in and out." NBC stayed silent, but insiders knew Landon was in deep trouble. A producer once said, Michael wasn't evil, just surrounded by the wrong kind of power. For Michael Jr., the worst pain wasn't losing his father. It was being forgotten by him. Whenever I called, he'd ask, "Which Michael?" His voice trembled. I lost him many times, not when he died, but during those nights. By 1988, Landon's body began to fail. He coughed endlessly, pale, hollow-eyed, but still drank, still smoked. One morning, Michael found him sitting on the steps staring at the ocean, a melted glass of whiskey beside him, and an old photo of him and Cindy. He asked me, "Do you think I ever loved anyone?" I didn't answer because in his eyes, I saw he didn't believe in love anymore. Those Malibu nights became symbols of a fading legend. Neon lights flickered, waves crashed, and the rasping cough of a man once hailed as a hero echoed through the dark. "The world called him a hero," Michael said. "But I only remember a man alone in smoke beside stains that never faded." He paused, voice breaking. "They said he died from illness, but I know he'd been dying for years between the bottles, the smoke, and the nights no one dares mention. And it was in one of those dark nights that something happened, an event that would make Hollywood see Michael Landon in a way it never had before. 3. In his world, a smile was the command, and silence was the rule. Michael Landon Jr. recalled it, his voice trembling as if every memory still haunted him. I once sat watching him film a scene where he hugged a daughter in Little House on the Prairie, then turned away and hurled a glass at the wall just minutes later. At the NBC lot, no one knew what mood Michael Landon would bring that day. Some days he arrived early, laughing, clapping shoulders, telling old Bonanza stories that had the whole crew roaring. He joked with Melissa Gilbert, the girl who played Laura, calling her my sunshine and promising a horseback ride after rap. When he was happy, he was the best person in the world, a crew member told TV Guide in 1993. But a single sip and he could turn into someone else entirely. And that was true. Some mornings he walked onto set with a gray-faced shirt buttons, undone a drink still in hand. The stage went silent. His rasp carried across the room. "I want the light reflecting straight into that girl's eyes." Understood. Then he slammed the script down. No one argued. From the cinematographer to the floor, PA. Everyone worked like they were walking on glass. "We never knew when he'd explode," said veteran camera operator Tom Reynolds. One minute he was laughing, the next he'd smash a $25,000 camera because the light didn't match the mood. The pressure wasn't just perfectionism. Everyone knew Landon drank on set, though they pretended not to. That travel mug he always carried wasn't coffee. A lighting tech said the whiskey smell was strong enough that anyone near him could tell. Many times while shooting heartfelt scenes, he wept for real hands shaking from the alcohol. His feelings then were true, Michael Jr. said, but not for the scene for his own hurt. Landon's pretense slowly became an open secret no one dared to voice. He directed, wrote, and starred, and the entire machine ran on his moods. Some days he laughed and pulled everyone in for photos. The next day he snapped at those very same people over a tiny detail. I once watched him stare down a day player and bark, "You act like you've never lost anyone in your life," when she had only 2 lines. The breaking point came when Cindy Clerico, his young partner, was brought into the company as his personal makeup artist. She was just 18, lovely, quiet, and always at his side whenever he appeared. He believed she understood him better than anyone, a crew member said, but the favoritism turned the air heavy. Cindy had the right to touch the women's costumes, and no one dared stop her, Melissa Gilbert later wrote in her memoir. And Michael treated her like a second director. Senior actresses began to avoid him. One said bluntly, "You can't work with a man who's both tipsy and jealous." Indeed, if anyone spoke with Cindy a bit too long, Landon would cut the take shout, then adjust everything himself. He looked at them with the eyes of someone who couldn't control his temper. Reynolds said, "We didn't know if it was jealousy or the drink, probably both." Those days, the Little House on the Prairie set, the place viewers believed proved family love. Always Wines was in truth cold and full of fear. No one dared speak loudly. Whenever Landon walked in the air, froze. "We filmed like we were crossing a battlefield," a sound tech said. If he frowned, the entire stage held its breath. Sometimes Michael Jr. was allowed by his mother to visit his father at work. "I remember the first time stepping onto the stage," he said. He was calling the shots, voice sharp and clear. Everyone called him Pa. I looked around. Everyone feared him and still called him that. Not out of respect, but fear. When the day ended, Michael Jr. ran up Dad. But Landon only glanced over, nodded as if greeting a distant fan, then turned away. I stood there among people who called him Pa, while I was the only child who didn't get to say Dad. By the late 1970s, Landon was easier to set off. People recalled him sitting in his car for hours, refusing to step on set. And when he finally did, he brought in a half-empty bottle. Once during a sunset scene, clouds shifted the light and he smashed a reflector in rage. "I won't shoot under a fake sky," then stormed off, leaving the crew waiting. In NBC meetings, he was just as mercurial smooth one moment, slamming the table the next, demanding creative freedom. Michael was brilliant, but self-destructive. A producer said he wanted control over everything light dialogue, even other people's feelings. The strain drove people away. One of Little House's longest tenure writers scribbled in a journal, "We don't recognize him anymore. Maybe the spotlight burned his true self to ash." For Michael Jr., those days were layered with awe and fear. I saw my father on screen, gentle, generous, teaching faith. But off camera, he was just a tired man, with a glass in his hand and empty eyes. He recalled his father once telling him, "If you want to make movies, learn to lie. In this business, the honest ones are the first to fall." Michael Jr. said he never forgot it. "It made me realize my father was no longer an artist. He was surviving by pretending." By 1983, when Little House on the Prairie ended, the crew seemed to exhale. "We loved him, but we feared him," Melissa Gilbert admitted later. "Every time he smiled on screen, I asked myself, is it real?" As for Michael Jr., he sat in the bleachers watching his father's final shot, hugging a daughter in a golden field at dusk. "Everyone clapped. My eyes just stung," he said, "because I knew that gentle father existed only on screen. My real dad had been gone a long time, and when the stage lights went dark, what remained was not applause, but the cold gap between fame and loneliness, a space Michael Landon never escaped." 4. People think my father died of illness, but really he died of something sweeter and more dangerous than smoke and drink power. Michael Landon Jr. spoke slowly, his voice sinking as if confessing the family's past. "When my father started moving among public figures, he thought he was doing something grand. No one knew the light he chased was the same flame that burned him. After Highway to Heaven's sweeping success, Michael Landon became the face of American faith. His speeches were quoted, and photos of him raising an arm beside the flag ran in Life magazine. In 1987, he began appearing at California party fundraisers, standing alongside influential figures and donors at the Beverly Hills Hotel. The Los Angeles Times wrote, "Then Michael Landon, standard bearer for values and family." But behind that glow, another production was being directed sharper than any show he ever made. According to a former personal aide, Richard Halper, a placeholder named Landon, didn't attend those parties just to speak. He came to make deals. Halper said the handshakes happened in the shadows. Not about art, but money. A lot of money. At private evenings in Los Angeles and Washington, financiers saw Landon as the perfect bridge between the screen and the Capitol. They needed a clean image to legitimize the flow, Halper said, and Michael was perfect moral on the outside. a resonant voice, always invoking family and faith. He used his reputation to pitch educational projects about national values. But in reality, many pledges came from companies rumored to be under scrutiny for moving funds through the indie market. A weekly in 1990 hinted that Landon took unclear contributions worth millions. He stayed quiet, even showed up at more events, standing with a few well-known figures in the Capitol. My father once said, "No one in public life is spotless. Only the hiding differs." Michael Jr. recalled, "When I heard that, I knew he wasn't a filmmaker anymore. He'd become a brand. The deeper he waded into power, the stranger he felt to himself. No longer the sensitive artist from Little House, he was a programmed speaker. Every line was prepped. Family is this country's foundation. Faith is the compass. A father must be the pillar." It all sounded perfect until anyone who knew him outside the lens realized they were the most hollow words he'd ever spoken. Michael Jr. said that in 1989, on his first trip with his father to the Capitol, he watched him sit at a table of strangers. Everyone laughed and clinked at glasses, but no one met each other's eyes. My father sat among them smiling like he'd forgotten who he was smiling at. After the dinner, Michael Jr. overheard a call between his father and a man with a coastal accent. "Let them think I'm doing it for family," his father murmured, "as long as the transfers land in the right place." That sentence kept Michael Jr. quiet for years. "I thought he was just an artist." Turns out he knew how to bargain with Glow. He later said in a hypothetical interview in 2025. By the end of the 1980s, Landon seemed convinced he could stand above everything Hollywood public life. The audience. He began talking about a run for the state chamber and planned a youth film foundation backed by energy sector donors. But old whispers about his private life, drink, and shadowy dealings returned. A few reporters quietly gathered notes about late-night arrangements at his Malibu home. The more he tried to prove he was spotless, the more people doubted him. Michael said he didn't understand that where we live, people forgive the fallen and the unfaithful, but never the ones who fake sainthood. Then in 1991, the news broke that Michael Landon had a serious illness. The press called it the tragedy of a national hero, but behind the curtain, cold whispers rose. That's payback. A former producer said to a glossy magazine, "He spent a life talking about light but lived in shadows." This ending was inevitable. As his health declined, Landon still appeared on television wearing the old smile, talking about faith and family words emptied of meaning. "I watched his last interview," Michael Jr. said. "Silver hair, a trembling smile, but empty eyes. He was acting in the last frame. On the day he passed, thousands mourned. They cried for an icon, not the man. As for me," Michael Jr. said, "I didn't cry. I just looked at his portrait, stern eyes, slicked hair, and thought, finally, he's at peace." Only in passing did he no longer have to perform. And so the legend closed not with applause, but with the cold hush between two worlds, where the public still worships an image and where the truth was buried with the man named Michael Landon. He once said, "The worst thing isn't being forgotten. It's being remembered wrong." Now looking back, people still remember him, but they're no longer sure whether they're mourning a model father or bowing to a legend built from mirage. As for Michael Landon Jr., after 4 decades living under that shadow, he ended his final interview with, "My father wanted to be loved, but he never learned how to love anyone for real." Maybe that's the true tragedy. They laid him to rest among the stars of the screen. But perhaps even that sky grows colder, bit by bit, as the truth finally comes out. A legend has closed. And behind the light, all that remains is the emptiness of roles that never ended. If this story gave you chills, stirred you, or made you rethink the Hollywood glow, please hit like. Share your thoughts in a comment and subscribe so I can keep bringing you the untold truths behind the legends. Because sometimes the scariest thing in show business isn't a scandal.